Imagine a moment you're standing in front of a mirror looking at yourself, but something feels off. The reflection isn't just your face, it's the emotions you've buried, the anger you never admit, the fear you pretend doesn't exist, or the dreams you gave up long ago. That's your shadow, the part of your soul Carl Jung called the shadow. Today, we're embarking on a journey to explore it. This isn't just another video. It's a call to confront the deepest parts of yourself, to stop running, and to start living authentically. Have you ever wondered why you react strongly to certain people or situations? Why you feel trapped in cycles of envy, resentment, or self-doubt? The answer lies in your shadow, and if you dare to face it, you'll find not only healing, but also a strength you never knew you had. Comment right now, "I'm ready to face my shadow," and let's begin this journey together. Don't forget to like and subscribe to stay updated with profound lessons on the soul and personal growth. We'll explore what the shadow is, how it controls your life, and how to turn it into a source of power. Plus, I'll reveal the 6 dangerous personality types Jung warned about, people who can quietly sabotage your happiness if you're not careful. Stay until the end, because I'll share a life-changing lesson that will forever shift how you see yourself. First, let's talk about the shadow. Carl Jung, a Swiss psychologist who revolutionized how we understand the mind, described the shadow as the unconscious part of the psyche, home to the emotions, desires, and traits we've suppressed due to shame, fear, or societal pressure. It's the anger you hold back because your mom said, "Girls don't get mad." It's the ambition you buried because your dad said, "Don't chase pipe dreams." It's the deep sadness you hide because your friends said, "Men don't show weakness." In America, where culture glorifies perfection, tidy suburban homes, bright Instagram smiles, and rags to riches success stories, we're taught to hide anything imperfect. But here's the truth: what you hide doesn't disappear. It quietly grows, controlling you from the shadows. Ever wonder why you snap at a coworker just for bragging about a project? Or why you feel irritated seeing your friend post about their world travels? That's not random. That's your shadow whispering, begging to be seen. I remember a moment in my life living in Chicago and working at an advertising firm. I was always striving to be the perfect employee, punctual, agreeable, saying yes to every demand from my boss. But inside, I felt like I was dying. I envied colleagues who dared to say no, demand raises, or boldly share wild ideas. I thought I hated them, but the truth was I hated myself for burying my own confidence and courage. One day, after hearing a coworker named Jake boast about his promotion, I went home and journaled. I asked myself, why does this bother me so much? The answer stunned me. I wasn't jealous of Jake. I was jealous of his freedom, something I'd denied myself. That was the first time I touched my shadow, and it was painful but also empowering. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you'll call it fate." That quote changed me. I started asking, what am I hiding and why? The shadow isn't just negative emotions. It also holds forgotten gifts, the creativity you stopped pursuing after your third-grade art teacher criticized your painting, or the assertiveness you suppressed because friends teased you for being too serious. In America, where we're often forced into molds, always be positive. Don't make waves. The shadow becomes a locked treasure chest. But if you dare to unlock it, you'll find not just wounds, but the strength to live a more authentic life. Think of Taylor, a single mom in Atlanta I once counseled. Taylor always felt angry at her sister, who seemed to have a perfect life, great job, loving husband, and lavish vacations. She thought she was just jealous, but as we worked together, she realized her anger came from a deeper place. She'd given up her dream of becoming a photographer because her mom said it was unrealistic. Her sister, with her confidence and success, was a mirror for what Taylor had buried. When she started taking photos again, even just family snapshots on her iPhone, she felt like she was rediscovering herself. Her anger toward her sister faded, replaced by gratitude. That's the magic of facing the shadow. It doesn't just heal you, it changes how you see the world. Now let's talk about how the shadow shows up in daily life. One of the clearest ways is through projection, when you see in others what you can't accept in yourself. Think about the last time someone annoyed you. Was it that coworker in your Seattle office who brags about their accomplishments, or that friend at the gym who's always bursting with energy? Those feelings aren't about them, they're about you. Jung called this projection when we cast our suppressed traits onto others. I had a friend named Mike in Denver who always irritated me because he was so lazy. He worked part-time, spending his days playing guitar or hiking. I thought I hated his irresponsibility, but when I dug deeper, I realized I was jealous of his freedom. I was working 60-hour weeks, never daring to rest, because I feared being seen as a failure. Mike was a mirror for my shadow, the longing to slow down, to enjoy life. When I started making time for myself, like taking walks in the park or reading on weekends, I stopped seeing Mike as a problem. Instead, I thanked him for unintentionally teaching me a lesson. Triggered emotions are another gateway to the shadow. When you overreact, like when you lose it because someone cuts you off in line at Starbucks, or feel crushed seeing an old classmate's success on Facebook, it's not just about the situation. It's your shadow raising its hand, demanding attention. I remember a time in Los Angeles when I nearly cried hearing a friend named Emily brag about buying a condo in Santa Monica. I told myself I was happy for her, but deep down I felt like a failure. When I sat down and wrote about that feeling, I realized my sadness wasn't about Emily. It was because I'd given up my dream of moving to California to pursue creative work. That trigger was a reminder to listen to my desires. I started freelancing, taking small steps, and each one made me feel more alive. Try this right now. Think of someone who recently annoyed you. Write down 3 traits of theirs you dislike. Then ask yourself, where have I suppressed these traits in myself? Maybe you hate someone's confidence because you've never dared to stand up for yourself. Or you're irritated by their laziness because you fear resting will make you less valuable. Comment one trait you notice. We're building a community of truth and growth together. The shadow isn't just personal, it's shaped by society. In America, we live in a culture that worships perfection and success. TV ads, social media posts, even family stories about the American dream, they all teach us to hide parts that aren't good enough. This is the collective shadow, the fears, biases, and wounds of an entire society. Think about the pressure to always be positive. In cities like New York or San Francisco, you're expected to smile and push forward even when you're breaking inside. This creates a collective shadow of shame around negative emotions like sadness or anger. Or look at history. Issues like racism or gender inequality aren't just political, they're collective wounds living in how we treat each other, raise our kids, and view the world. I once worked with a client named Brian, a software engineer in Austin. Brian prided himself on being unbiased, but in a session, he admitted feeling uneasy working with a new colleague from a different cultural background. He thought he just didn't vibe with them, but as we dug deeper, Brian realized he grew up in a neighborhood where differences were met with suspicion. It wasn't his fault, but it was part of the collective shadow he'd absorbed. When he started questioning those biases, he didn't just change how he interacted with his colleague, he began talking openly with his son about diversity. That's the power of healing the shadow. It doesn't just change you, it changes the world around you. To make the shadow more relatable, let's hear about Lisa, a banker in Philadelphia. Lisa always felt she was never good enough. She worked late, took on every project, but still felt like she was falling behind her colleagues. She especially hated a coworker named Mark, who confidently pitched ideas, even imperfect ones. Lisa thought Mark was arrogant, but when she started journaling about her feelings, she uncovered the truth. She was jealous of Mark's confidence, something she'd been taught to suppress as a child. Her parents always said, "Don't show off," and she'd learned to stay quiet even when she had brilliant ideas. Lisa experimented. She signed up to present at a meeting, though her heart pounded with fear. The result, her boss praised her ideas, and she felt a surge of new energy. Lisa's shadow, her insecurity and fear of judgment didn't vanish, but it became a guide helping her reclaim her voice. Another story is about Ethan, a high school teacher in Portland. Ethan prided himself on being easygoing, but he was constantly exhausted from pleasing everyone: students, parents, colleagues. One day, when a colleague named Sarah refused overtime, saying, "I need time for my family," Ethan felt angry. He thought Sarah was selfish, but sitting with a coffee and writing out his feelings, he realized he was jealous of her ability to set boundaries. He'd grown up in a family where doing everything for others was the norm, and he'd never learned to say no. Ethan started setting small boundaries, like refusing weekend overtime, and was surprised when people respected him more. His anger at Sarah turned to gratitude, as she'd unintentionally shown him what he needed to learn. Stories like Lisa's and Ethan's show that the shadow isn't something to fear. It's a teacher if you're willing to listen. Try this. Think of a time you felt stuck in an emotion, maybe anger, envy, or shame. Write down the question, "What is this emotion trying to tell me?" Spend 10 minutes writing without censoring yourself. You might be surprised by what you uncover. Comment one thing you discover. We're walking this path together. Now let's talk about the gifts hidden in the shadow. Jung believed the shadow doesn't just hold pain, it holds forgotten strengths. Have you ever been told you're too much, too loud, too sensitive, too ambitious? Those traits aren't flaws. They're your superpowers locked away because someone didn't see their value. I remember in college in Boston, my friends teased me for being too dreamy. I loved writing short stories and imagining I'd publish a book someday, but I stopped writing, fearing ridicule. When I started working with my shadow, I realized that dreaminess was my creativity. I began writing again, posting stories on a blog, and now I'm working on a novel. My shadow wasn't a weakness, it was my creative fire. Think of Hannah, a nurse in Minneapolis. Hannah was always told by her family she was too sensitive because she cried, seeing others in pain. She tried to hide her emotions, but it drained her. In a psychology course, she learned about the shadow and realized her sensitivity was a gift. It let her connect with patients, offering comfort no one else could. Hannah started using her sensitivity intentionally, like talking to patients about their feelings, and she became one of the most beloved nurses in her hospital. Her shadow wasn't a burden, it was her strength. Try this exercise. Write down a trait you've been criticized for, like too sensitive or too stubborn. Then list 3 ways it could be a gift. For example, if you were called stubborn, it might be persistence, determination, or the ability to stand up for what you believe in. Comment one gift you find. I'd love to hear your story. Next, let's talk about the 6 dangerous personality types Jung warned about, people who can quietly sabotage your life if you don't recognize them. These types often carry their unhealed shadows, and if you're not careful, they'll pull you into their darkness. Let's explore each one with real stories and lessons. 1. The chronic victim. They thrive on pity, always blaming others for their struggles. Their pain is real, but they use it to manipulate you. I had a friend named Claire in San Diego who constantly talked about her bad relationships, but never changed. She wanted me to spend hours comforting her, and if I was busy, she'd say things like, I guess I'm not important to you. I realized I was being drawn into her drama and had to set boundaries. Lesson: don't let compassion make you neglect yourself. Comment if you've met this type. What did you do to protect your energy? 2. The charming mirror. They reflect your dreams and values, making you think you've found a soulmate, but it's an act. When you stop feeding their ego, they vanish. I worked with a colleague named Derek in Miami who always agreed with my ideas, making me think he was an ally. But when I got promoted, he turned cold and spread rumors about me. Jung called this the persona, an empty mask. Be wary of people who seem too perfect. Truth lies in actions, not words. 3. The passive-aggressive supporter. They hide control behind fake concern, like saying, "I'm just worried you'll be disappointed when you share your dreams." I had an aunt in Ohio who always said, "Are you sure you want to be a writer?" It's so hard whenever I shared my plans. She wasn't malicious, but her doubt held me back. I learned to trust my intuition and ignore such concern. If someone makes you doubt yourself, ask, are they supporting or stifling you? The secret competitor. They smile at your success, but secretly envy you and try to outdo you. I had a friend named Lauren in Dallas who always copied my style and ideas, acting like it was a coincidence. When I was invited to speak at a conference, she said, "Oh, they must not have found anyone else." I realized she wasn't a friend, she was a rival. Protect your energy by choosing people who truly support you. 5. The spiritual narcissist. They use spiritual language to feel superior, dismissing your feelings as just your ego. I joined a meditation group in Boulder where the leader, Sophia, said, "You're not enlightened enough to understand whenever I asked questions." She wasn't a guide, she was seeking admiration. True spirituality lifts others up, not puts them down. Run from those who make you feel small. The emotional controller. They use sensitivity to manipulate, making you feel responsible for their moods. I had a roommate named Josh in Brooklyn who'd go silent for days if I didn't do what he wanted, like cooking together or cleaning at the same time. I felt guilty, but I realized I wasn't his peacekeeper. I set boundaries, and he eventually respected me more. Remember, you're not responsible for others' emotions. These types are dangerous because they don't confront you openly. They manipulate from the shadows. Protect yourself by trusting your intuition and setting clear boundaries. Comment: which of these types have you encountered? How did you overcome them? Now let's talk about how to start working with your shadow. It doesn't have to be complex. You don't need to unearth every childhood memory right away. Start small. Each day, notice an emotion that bothers you, like when you're jealous of someone's Instagram post or snap at a barista for being slow. Instead of ignoring it, pause and ask, "What's this feeling telling me?" The first tool is journaling. Get a small notebook like one from Target and write everything without censoring. I used to carry a notebook on the New York subway, and whenever I felt triggered, I wrote. Once I was annoyed at a stranger in a bar for talking too loudly. Writing it out, I realized I didn't hate him. I hated that I didn't dare speak my opinions loudly. Journaling reveals hidden truths. The second tool is mindfulness. No, you don't need to meditate for hours on a mountain. Just spend 5 minutes a day breathing and observing your thoughts. When you think I'm not good enough or they don't respect me, notice without judgment. I do this while walking in a park near my Seattle home, focusing on my breath and letting thoughts pass. It helps you see that the stories in your head, like "I'm a failure, aren't you?" they're echoes of your shadow. The third tool is self-reflection. After a strong reaction, like snapping at your roommate for leaving dishes out, ask, "What does this remind me of?" Maybe you're mad, not about the dishes, but because you grew up in a home where mess meant chaos. I once got mad at a friend named Rachel for always being late. Reflecting, I realized I feared abandonment rooted in my dad breaking promises when I was a kid. Self-reflection connects the dots of your shadow. If this work feels heavy, seek support. A therapist, coach, or trusted friend can guide you through the darkness without getting lost. I worked with a therapist in San Francisco who helped me see my fear of failure wasn't the truth. It was a shadow I needed to embrace. Comment: which tool will you try first? Journaling, mindfulness, or self-reflection? Next, let's talk about the role of stories and myths. Jung believed myths are the language of the soul reflecting our shadows. Think of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Jekyll tries to separate himself from his dark desires, but it only makes Hyde stronger. The lesson: you can't destroy the shadow, you must accept it. Or look at Loki, the trickster god in Norse mythology. Loki causes chaos, but his disruptions often lead to truth. I see Loki in myself when I try to keep everything perfect, like when I hosted a party in Austin and freaked out because things weren't going as planned. When I let go of control, the party got fun, and I realized my shadow fear of chaos was an invitation to live more freely. My story is like the myth of Icarus, who flew too close to the sun. I was so scared of failure that I didn't try new things, like when I turned down a chance to speak at a Chicago conference because I feared messing up. But when I accepted failure as part of the journey, I started taking risks, like writing this for you. What myth speaks to your shadow? Comment to share. Now let's talk about the collective impact of shadow work. When you heal your shadow, you don't just change yourself, you change the world. The collective shadow, like racism, inequality, or toxic workplace cultures, grows when we project our pain onto others. But every time you face your biases or emotions, you break that cycle. I saw this in a Portland community group where people started discussing their unconscious biases about gender and race. Those conversations, sparked by personal shadow work, built understanding and connection. Try this. Next time you judge someone, pause. Ask, what does this judgment hide in me? Your honesty creates space for others to do the same. Comment, I heal myself to heal the world. Jung's ultimate goal was integration, becoming whole by embracing both your light and darkness. This isn't about being perfect, it's about being real. When you accept all parts of yourself, you stop fighting yourself. You speak without fear, love without masks, and live without shame. I felt this when I embraced my sensitivity. I used to think it made me weak, but now I see it's my strength connecting me to others. My relationships deepened, and I attracted people who value the real me. Integration is a spiral. Each time you embrace a new part, you expand. Try saying out loud, I am enough with all my darkness. Feel the freedom. Comment, I choose wholeness. Finally, here's the big lesson. Shadow work isn't about erasing your bad parts. It's about seeing all of you with honest eyes. Fear, shame, envy, anger, they're not flaws. They're messengers carrying news of unmet needs, forgotten dreams, and old wounds. Healing isn't becoming perfect, it's becoming whole. I remember a moment in San Francisco sitting on Ocean Beach writing about my fear of rejection. I realized that fear wasn't my enemy. It was a reminder I craved love for who I am. When I embraced it, I started living authentically, saying no when needed, loving without fear of hurt, and chasing dreams without permission. This journey has no final destination. It's a spiral taking you deeper into yourself each time you face a new emotion. With every layer you accept, you're freer. That's the quiet revolution of spiritual wisdom, not pretending to be enlightened, but living as someone at peace with all their parts. Affirm your commitment in the comments, I accept all of me. Thank you for walking this path with me. The shadow isn't something to fear, it's the doorway to wholeness. If this video touched you, hit like, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe to keep growing, healing, and transforming. Click the bell to never miss a video. We'll meet again, and remember, when you face what you've been running from, you reclaim your power and unlock the person you've always been waiting to become. But our story doesn't end there. Imagine standing at a crossroads in your life where every choice feels like a gamble. Do you dare step over the line of safety to face your shadow, or turn back and keep living a half-life? That's the question I asked myself on a rainy night in Chicago when I got an unexpected email from my boss. It wasn't praise or a promotion, it was a warning. They said I'd been unfocused on recent projects, that I needed to prove my worth to keep my position. I was stunned. Me, the one who worked to exhaustion, who never said no to a task, was being told I wasn't good enough. Anger surged, but deep down I heard a small voice. Are they right? Am I really not enough? That was my shadow growling from the darkness, pulling me into a spiral of self-doubt. I decided not to let that feeling consume me. Instead of replying to the email right away, I grabbed my notebook and started writing. I wrote about every time I felt I had to prove something, from childhood school days, striving for A's to make my parents proud, to company meetings where I stayed silent despite knowing my ideas could change the project. As I wrote, a terrifying truth emerged. I'd spent my life pleasing others, and my shadow fear of rejection, fear of not being loved, had kept me in an invisible prison. But then something strange happened. Amid the chaos of those pages, I found a spark. I didn't need anyone's approval to be myself. That was the moment I decided to change, not just to save my job, but to save myself. The next day, I walked into the office with a bold plan. Instead of apologizing or trying to fix myself to fit my boss's mold, I requested a private meeting. My heart pounded as I sat across from him, but I knew this was my chance to let my shadow speak. I said, I understand your concerns, but I believe I can bring more value if given the chance to lead a new project. I pitched an idea. I'd been nurturing a campaign inspired by customers' personal stories, something no one in the company had tried. My boss stared at me, silent for what felt like an eternity. Then he nodded. All right, you have 2 weeks to prove it. That was the turning point. I not only kept my job, I led my team to secure the biggest contract of the year. But more importantly, I stopped running from my shadow. I let it guide me. This story isn't just about me, it's about you. Have you ever faced an opportunity that could change your life, but your fear screamed, "Don't do it, you'll fail"? That's your shadow, and how you face it will define who you become. Think of Jessica, a restaurant manager in Miami I once coached. Jessica was loved for her cheerfulness and dedication, but she had a secret. She was so scared of failure that she never dared open her own restaurant, despite dreaming of it since waiting tables in college. One day, the restaurant she worked at closed due to the pandemic, and she faced a choice: apply to another chain or dare to chase her dream. Jessica trembled as she told me she'd written a business plan one sleepless night, only to shove it in a drawer, fearing she wasn't good enough. Her shadow fear of failure was holding her tight. I encouraged Jessica to do a simple exercise: write a letter to her 18-year-old self, who dreamed of a cozy restaurant serving dishes inspired by her grandmother's recipes. In the letter, she wrote about her fears, but also about the times she made customers smile, the dishes she created that wowed the restaurant. Reading it back, Jessica cried. She realized her shadow wasn't just fear, it held the passion and resilience she'd forgotten. She took action. She took out a small loan, rented a tiny space in Little Havana, and opened a diner called Mama's Kitchen. On opening day, she stood before the crowd, trembling but proud, as customers lined up to try her signature ropa vieja. Today, Mama's Kitchen is a Miami hotspot, and Jessica isn't just a chef, she's a symbol of courage. Her story reminds us that the shadow isn't the enemy, it's a guide if you dare to listen. But what happens when you don't listen to the shadow? Let me tell you about Tom, a lawyer in Boston who nearly lost everything by refusing to face his darkness. Tom was the picture of success, a luxe Back Bay apartment, a fancy car, and a career everyone envied. But inside, Tom was crumbling. He was addicted to work, logging 80-hour weeks to mask an emptiness. He envied colleagues who lived slower, like his old roommate Chris, who quit law to open a coffee shop in Vermont. Tom thought Chris was a loser, but deep down, he was jealous of Chris's freedom. Tom's shadow fear of losing status, fear of not being valued, controlled him. One day, during a major trial, Tom collapsed from stress in the courtroom. Doctors diagnosed severe burnout, and he had to take 3 months off. During that time, Tom came to me for coaching. He admitted he'd never dared look inside himself, fearing he'd find a failure. I suggested he try an exercise, write down 3 things he'd do if no one judged him. Tom wrote travel, the world, learn guitar, and write a book about his cases. But he laughed at himself. Who'd quit a law job for that nonsense? I told him to try one small thing, sign up for a guitar class. Tom reluctantly agreed, thinking it was silly. But after his first lesson, he called me voice shaking. I haven't felt this alive in years. Guitar wasn't just a hobby, it was a doorway to Tom's shadow, where joy and creativity lay buried under his need to be successful. Today, Tom is still a lawyer, but works fewer hours, making time to write and play music. He no longer envies Chris. Instead, he thanks him for unknowingly showing the way. Tom's story is a warning. If you don't face your shadow, it will find a way to break you. Maybe not a collapse like Tom's, but in quieter moments, like waking up wondering, "What's the point of my life?" Jung said. The shadow doesn't vanish when you ignore it. It grows stronger, waiting to erupt. I remember a workshop in Los Angeles where a speaker shared about her client, Sarah, a marketing exec in Beverly Hills. Sarah had it all: a mansion, a Tesla, and an Instagram with thousands of followers. But she felt empty. She hated her colleagues, especially one named Amanda, who was open about her struggles from divorce to single parenting. Sarah thought Amanda was weak, but in a journaling session, she realized she was jealous of Amanda's authenticity. Sarah had spent her life building a perfect image, hiding her own wounds, like her parents' divorce when she was young, or the feeling she was never enough. Her shadow fear of vulnerability had trapped her in a fake life. Sarah decided to change. She started sharing real stories on Instagram, not just wins, but failures. She wrote about days she felt like a failure, nights she cried from stress. Surprisingly, her posts got hundreds of comments from people saying her honesty inspired them. Sarah didn't just heal her shadow, she became a light for others. She and Amanda are now close friends, and Sarah says Amanda taught her how to live authentically. This story is a twist. The person you think is an enemy might lead you to freedom if you dare face your shadow. But what happens when the shadow isn't just personal, but part of a larger system? Think of the collective shadow society's wounds we inherit without realizing. In America, we live in a culture that glorifies the American dream, but its shadow is shame about failure, racial divides, and pressure to be perfect. I worked with a tech company in Silicon Valley where the culture was work till you drop. An employee named Priya, a software engineer, always felt she had to prove she was the best, as the only Indian woman on her team. She hated a colleague named Ryan who seemed to get praise despite doing less. Priya wasn't wrong to think Ryan had advantages as a white man. That's part of the collective shadow of workplace racism. But working together, Priya realized she was also projecting. She envied Ryan's ease. something she never allowed herself fearing judgment. Priya chose to face both her personal and collective shadows. She started openly discussing the pressures she faced with her team, and surprisingly, Ryan listened. He admitted he hadn't seen his privilege, and they began collaborating to create a fairer workplace. Priya didn't just heal her pain, she changed the company culture one small step at a time. This is a big twist. The collective shadow isn't something you can escape, but when you face it, you can change a system. Comment: have you ever noticed a piece of the collective shadow in your life? What was it, and what did you do? Now, let's dive deeper into working with the shadow in daily life. Let me tell you about Emily, a college student in Ann Arbor, Michigan, who transformed her life with one simple tool: journaling. Emily was an introvert, always teased by her family for being too quiet. She felt she was never interesting enough, and especially hated a classmate named Olivia, who was the life of every party. Emily thought Olivia was fake, but in a psychology class she was assigned to journal about triggering emotions. One night, after seeing Olivia post about landing a prestigious internship, Emily felt punched in the chest. She wrote, "Why do I hate her so much? What do I want?" In the chaotic lines, she realized she didn't hate Olivia. She was jealous of Olivia's confidence, something Emily had been taught to suppress since childhood when her mom said, "Don't be the center of attention." Emily took action. She started taking small steps out of her comfort zone, joining a debate club, signing up to present in class. The first time she stood before her class, her voice shook, but when she finished, the room applauded. Olivia even came up and said, "I didn't know you could speak like that." Emily realized Olivia wasn't the enemy, she was a mirror for Emily's shadow. Today, Emily is president of the debate club and considering running for student council. Her shadow fear of being seen became the fire that pushed her to shine. Try Emily's exercise next time you're triggered. Write down every emotion without censoring. Then ask, "What's this emotion hiding?" Comment, "One thing you discover. I'm here to listen." But the story doesn't stop at triumphs. Let's talk about failures because they're part of the journey too. I remember a time in Denver when I tried to host a shadow work workshop for the local community. I prepared for weeks, but only 3 people showed up. I felt like a failure, and my shadow fear of not being good enough roared. I wanted to cancel everything and never try again. But instead of running, I sat down and wrote about the feeling. I realized my fear of failure stemmed from childhood when I was mocked for losing an art contest. I decided not to let my shadow win. I hosted the workshop again this time in a small coffee shop, and dozens showed up. One attendee, a woman named Karen, told me the workshop helped her face her fear of rejection, and she was starting a memoir. My failure wasn't the end, it was a bridge to bigger change. Karen's story is another twist. Sometimes the shadow leads you to the people who need you most. Karen, a librarian in Colorado Springs, had lived in silence, fearing her story as a survivor of domestic abuse wasn't worth sharing. But at my workshop, she started journaling about her wounds. She realized her shadow shame and fear of judgment had kept her in darkness. Karen began sharing her story in support groups and eventually published a memoir. Breaking the Silence. The book didn't just heal her, it inspired hundreds to speak out. Karen told me, "My shadow was once my prison, but now it's my light." Comment, how have you turned a failure into an opportunity? Now let's dive deeper into another facet of the shadow, how it appears in close relationships. Let me tell you about David, a graphic designer in Brooklyn, who nearly lost the love of his life because of his shadow. David and his girlfriend Mia had been together 3 years, and everyone thought they were perfect. But David had a secret. He felt insecure, fearing Mia would leave him because she was too good for him. He projected his fear onto Mia, becoming controlling, texting constantly when she was out with friends, getting angry when she worked late. Mia loved David, but she started feeling suffocated. One day, after a big fight, Mia said, "I can't keep going if you don't change." David was shocked. He came to me desperate and confused. I suggested he write a letter to his shadow as if it were a person. In it, David wrote about his fear of abandonment, rooted in his mother leaving when he was young. He realized he didn't control Mia because he distrusted her. He did it because he feared losing love. David apologized to Mia and began working on his shadow. He joined a therapy group in Manhattan, learning to trust and let go of control. Surprisingly, Mia didn't just forgive him. She joined the group with him, and they started building a relationship based on honesty and freedom. Today, they're engaged, and David says his shadow, once a destroyer, is now the guardian of their love. This story is a twist. The shadow can ruin relationships, but if you embrace it, it can save them. Try David's exercise. Write a letter to your shadow. Ask, "What are you trying to protect me from?" and "What do you want me to learn?" You might be surprised by what you find. Comment, "One thing you discover, we're going deeper together." But what happens when the shadow isn't just in personal relationships, but in your biggest dreams? Let me tell you about Rachel, a freelance journalist in Washington, D.C., who gave up her dream because of her shadow. Rachel always wanted to write a book about America's homeless, but she never started fearing no one would care. She hated colleagues like Jason, who confidently published articles, even imperfect ones. Rachel thought Jason was arrogant, but in a writing course I taught she realized she was jealous of his courage. Her shadow fear of rejection had silenced her. I encouraged Rachel to try an exercise, write a test chapter for her book, as if no one would read it. Rachel wrote about a man named Marcus, whom she met at a D.C. bus stop. Marcus was once a teacher, but lost everything after an accident. His story moved Rachel, and when she read her chapter in class, the room went silent. A classmate, an editor, offered to introduce Rachel to a publisher. Rachel trembled as she sent the manuscript, but she did it. 6 months later, she got a publishing deal. Her book, Voices from the Streets, became a phenomenon chosen by Oprah's book club and inspiring homeless support programs nationwide. Rachel told me, "My shadow was once my enemy, but it led me to my purpose." This is a big twist. The dream you fear most might be what the world needs most if you face your shadow. Try Rachel's exercise. Write one page about something you've always wanted to do but feared. Don't worry if it's good, just write. Then share one sentence about your dream in the comments. I want to hear it. But the story doesn't end there. Think of the moment when your shadow isn't just a personal challenge, but a call to change an entire community. Let me tell you about Marcus, the man in Rachel's story. After Rachel's book was published, Marcus became a public figure. He was invited to speak at D.C. events, sharing his journey from teacher to homeless to activist. But Marcus had his own shadow shame about his years on the streets. He initially resented people like Rachel, thinking they just wanted to exploit his story for fame. But when he read her book, he realized she wasn't just telling his story, she was telling the truth. Marcus decided to face his shadow. He started a blog sharing his and other homeless people's stories. He organized fundraisers at local churches and eventually opened a support center for the homeless in Anacostia. But Marcus's journey wasn't easy. One night his center was vandalized, and he received threats from people who didn't want homeless people in the spotlight. Marcus nearly gave up, but he remembered his shadow, the shame that once silenced him. He refused to let it win. He organized a march in D.C. calling attention to homeless rights, and hundreds joined. Today, Marcus's center is a beacon of hope, and he's been invited to speak at Congress about policy reform. Marcus's story is a stunning twist. The shadow can be a burden, but when you embrace it, it becomes a flame that changes the world. How does Marcus's story inspire you? What do you want to change in your community? Marcus's story is proof that the shadow isn't just a personal journey, it can be a catalyst for massive change. But the path is never easy. After the D.C. march, Marcus became an icon, appearing on networks like CNN and even invited to the White House to discuss homeless support policies. But his shadow shame about his past and fear of being seen as a fraud didn't vanish. One day, a tabloid in Baltimore published an article accusing Marcus of exploiting his story for profit. It quoted an anonymous source claiming Marcus had fabricated parts of his past for attention. The rumor spread like wildfire, and Marcus's center began losing donors. He risked losing everything he'd built. I met Marcus at this time when he attended a workshop I hosted in New York. He looked exhausted, his eyes full of doubt. He said, "Was I wrong to think I could change things? Will my shadow always win?" I encouraged Marcus to try an exercise I call dialoguing with the shadow. I asked him to imagine his shame as a character, an old stern man whispering he wasn't worthy. Marcus wrote a dialogue asking, "Why do you keep pulling me down?" In those lines, he realized his shame wasn't the enemy. It was part of him, formed by years of society's scorn, being called a beggar or useless. But he also saw that shame had driven him to fight not just for himself, but for thousands of others. Marcus chose not to run from the scandal. Instead, he held a press conference outside his center with dozens of homeless people behind him. He said, "I'm not perfect. I've lived on the streets, been hungry, been hopeless. But I'm here to say everyone deserves a chance. If you want the truth, come here and hear our stories." The twist came when a woman named Carla, a former beneficiary of Marcus's help and now a center manager, stepped to the podium. She revealed the anonymous source was a fired employee who'd misused funds. Carla had quietly investigated and found evidence the article was a plot to discredit Marcus. The crowd erupted in applause, and donors began returning. But what gave me chills was when Marcus took Carla's hand and said, "My shadow made me think I was alone. Today I know I'm not." Marcus's center not only survived, it expanded to 3 new locations in Maryland, Virginia, and Delaware, becoming a model for homeless programs nationwide. Marcus's story is a jaw-dropping twist. The shadow can push you to the brink, but if you face it with truth, it leads to heights you never dreamed of. Comment: what in Marcus's story makes you want to stand up and act? But Marcus's journey isn't unique. Let's return to Rachel the journalist who wrote Voices from the Streets. After her book's success, Rachel was invited to speak at a TEDx event in San Francisco, an opportunity she never dared imagine. But her shadow fear of rejection resurfaced. The night before her talk, Rachel called me in a panic. "What if they think I'm a fraud? What if they hate my speech?" I told her to write down the worst-case scenario. Rachel wrote that she'd stutter, the audience would laugh, and she'd be booed off stage. Then I asked, "If that happens, what would you do?" Rachel thought and said I'd get up and keep going. "I've survived worse." In that moment, she realized her shadow wasn't her enemy. It was testing her strength. The next day, Rachel stepped onto the stage before 2,000 people. She opened with an unexpected story, how she was fired from a D.C. newsroom for writing about industry injustices. She said, "I used to think failure was my shadow, but now I see it's the fire that drives me to tell the stories the world needs to hear." Her talk went viral, racking up millions of YouTube views, and Rachel was invited to write a second book. But the real twist came when she received a letter from a 16-year-old named Lily in Oakland. Lily wrote that Rachel's talk inspired her to start a student newspaper to share stories of immigrants in her school. Rachel flew to Oakland to meet Lily, and they launched a collaborative online platform for teens to tell forgotten stories. Rachel told me, "My shadow used to say I wasn't enough. Now it reminds me my story can change lives." Comment, what moment in your life showed you failure wasn't the end, but a beginning? But let's pause to talk about another character, Jessica, who opened Mama's Kitchen in Miami. After her restaurant success, Jessica thought she'd conquered her shadow. But life always finds ways to test us. One day, a major restaurant chain offered to buy Mama's Kitchen for 7 figures. It was any entrepreneur's dream: money, fame, security. But reading the contract, Jessica saw the chain wanted to change everything. The menu would be standardized, her grandmother's traditional dishes replaced with modern ones, and the name Mama's Kitchen would become a generic brand. Jessica faced a choice: sell her dream for money or hold on to it and face risk. Her shadow fear of failure roared back. She lost sleep imagining her restaurant going bankrupt, becoming a failure in her family's eyes. She called me, voice frantic, "If I say no, I could lose everything. But if I sell, I lose myself." I suggested she imagine talking to her grandmother, who inspired Mama's Kitchen. Jessica wrote a letter as if her grandmother were there. In it, she asked, "What would you do?" Writing, Jessica realized her grandmother would never sell her values. She'd raised a family through tough times with love and grit. Jessica's shadow wasn't just fear, it was a reminder of the legacy she carried. Jessica rejected the offer. Instead, she launched a crowdfunding campaign to expand Mama's Kitchen without losing its soul. She posted a video on Instagram sharing her grandmother's story and why she opened the restaurant. The video went viral, raising over $200,000 in a week from people who loved her story. But the twist came when a local investor, a Cuban woman named Maria, contacted Jessica. Maria said she grew up on dishes like Jessica's grandmother's and wanted to invest in a Mama's Kitchen chain across Florida, keeping the original menu and spirit. Today, Mama's Kitchen has 5 locations, and Jessica is writing a cookbook to share her grandmother's recipes. She told me, "My shadow made me think I had to choose between my dream and safety, but it taught me I could have both if I stayed true to myself." Comment, have you ever faced a tough choice between your dream and security? What did you do? But Jessica's story has a deeper layer. While expanding Mama's Kitchen, she uncovered a family secret that shook her shadow. One day, searching old papers for her grandmother's recipes, Jessica found a letter from her mother, who died 10 years earlier. In it, her mother confessed that Jessica's grandmother wasn't the saint Jessica thought. She'd abandoned Jessica's mother as a child, leaving her with a harsh aunt. Her mother wrote that she'd forgiven her, but never told Jessica, fearing it would shatter the grandmother she adored. Jessica broke down. She felt her world, the recipes, the restaurant, her dream was built on a lie. Her shadow, already fear of failure, became a chasm of betrayal and doubt. Jessica called me sobbing. "If my grandmother wasn't who I thought, who am I? What does this restaurant mean?" I suggested a powerful exercise: write a letter to her grandmother, not to forgive, but to understand. Jessica wrote about the pain, but also the love, the afternoons her grandmother taught her to cook her laugh when she seasoned dishes. In the letter, she realized her grandmother wasn't a saint or a sinner, she was human with flaws and strengths. Jessica's shadow fear, she wasn't enough that she lived on a lie, became an invitation to embrace her own complexity. She chose to share this story in her cookbook, not just about food, but her family's wounds and healing. The book, Recipes from the Heart, became a bestseller, not just for the recipes, but for Jessica's honesty. She said, "My shadow was once my pain, but now it's my story." Comment, what family secret ever made you question yourself? How did you heal? But let's return to David and Mia, the Brooklyn couple, because their story has another twist I haven't shared. After getting engaged, David thought he'd solved his shadow fear of abandonment. But when Mia got a job offer in London, his shadow roared back stronger than ever. She'd be gone for 2 years, and though Mia wanted David to come, he couldn't leave his design career. David started feeling his old shadow doubt he was good enough to keep Mia. He grew distant, replying coldly to her texts, even picking fights over small things like Mia forgetting to call one night. Mia sensed something was wrong and flew back from London to confront David. In an all-night talk at their Williamsburg apartment, Mia said, "You're pushing me away because you're scared of losing me. But you'll lose me for real if you don't stop." Her words hit David like a punch. He realized his shadow wasn't something he could fix once and for all. It was part of him always needing attention. David did something bold. He joined a meditation retreat in the Catskills, learning to sit with his fear instead of running. During a meditation, he imagined embracing his shadow, a scared boy always worried about being left. When he returned, David wrote Mia a long letter, promising to learn to trust her, even from afar. Mia, moved by his honesty, suggested they try a long-distance relationship, visiting each other monthly. Today, David and Mia are stronger than ever, and David says his shadow is no longer his enemy. It's a reminder to love bravely. Comment: have you ever faced fear of losing someone you love? How did you overcome it? But the story isn't over. Let's return to Priya, the Silicon Valley software engineer, because her journey has a twist that gave me chills. After she and Ryan worked to improve their company culture, Priya was offered a promotion to team manager. It was her dream, but her shadow fear of not being respected as an Indian woman made her hesitate. She worried her mostly white male team wouldn't listen. She even doubted Ryan, thinking he only supported her to look good to leadership. Her shadow was growling, whispering she'd fail, that she didn't belong. Priya came to me nearly ready to decline the role. I suggested she write the story her shadow was telling, then write a new one. Priya wrote that her shadow said she'd be isolated, mocked, and fired. But in her new story, she envisioned leading with confidence, building trust, and making big changes. She decided to try, but with a condition. She asked the company to provide diversity and inclusion training for her team. Leadership agreed, and Priya stepped into the role with new resolve. But the twist came at her first team meeting. A veteran engineer named Greg openly challenged her, saying she lacked experience to lead. The room felt electric with tension. Priya's shadow screamed, "You don't belong." But instead of staying silent, she took a deep breath and said, "Greg, I respect your experience, but I'm here because I have a vision for this team. If you disagree, we can talk privately, but I expect us to work together." Silence blanketed the room. Then Ryan spoke. "I'm with Priya. Let's give her a chance." Others nodded, and Greg reluctantly agreed to work with her. From there, Priya not only earned her team's respect, she led them to develop a new product, winning the year's biggest tech award. She told me, "My shadow made me think I couldn't lead, but it taught me I'm stronger than I thought." Comment: have you faced a challenge that made you doubt yourself? How did you overcome it? But Priya's journey didn't stop there. After her project's success, she was invited to speak at a tech conference in Las Vegas, her first time addressing thousands. Her shadow resurfaced, whispering she'd failed, that she wasn't flashy enough for the stage. The night before, Priya nearly canceled. She called me, voice trembling, "If I mess up, people will think all women like me aren't capable." Her shadow wasn't just personal, it carried the weight of the collective shadow, the pressure of representing those often overlooked. I suggested Priya imagine talking to her 10-year-old self, who dreamed of being a scientist. Priya wrote a letter promising that girl she wouldn't let fear win. The next day, she took the stage not with perfection, but with truth. She shared her journey from a doubted girl in Mumbai schools to a Silicon Valley leader. She said, "My shadow told me I didn't belong. But today, I'm here to tell you we all have a place if we dare to claim it." The crowd gave a standing ovation, and Priya's talk trended on Twitter, inspiring thousands of women in tech. But the biggest twist was when Greg, who'd challenged her, emailed an apology. He wrote, "I was wrong. Thank you for showing me a different way to lead." Priya framed that email in her office, a reminder that her shadow is her strength, not her weakness. Comment: what moment made you realize you're stronger than you thought?